Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks, congratulations! Hey, this isn't the only place to find us. You can also find us at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Twitter. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. I am Josh. Joining me all the way from Primus Tracks Towers, all 38 floors of them in Mexico City, is Frankie Berestein.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Patreons. Hi, guys.
You know, it's a long elevator ride up to the top, Frankie, and I gotta imagine I know the soundtrack of your personal elevator to the loft there at Primus Tracks Towers. But what tune did you hear today as you rode up there to record today?
What tune? Was the last tune I was listening to before I arrived home?
Yeah.
Goon Squad by Elvis Costello.
Now, I would have guessed Bowie, but I think I'm close enough. All right. Goon Squad by Elvis Costello accompanied Frankie to his luxury loft on the 38th floor of Primus Tracks Towers today. We gotta make a playlist. You gotta let us know what you're listening to as you make your way up, and I think it'll be massively popular. Speaking of massively popular, Frankie, we have a couple of records that not a lot of people know about, and we're going back to the Prawn Song fold of 1990, of the mid-1990s. Today we're going to talk about Porch and their first record, Porch, featuring former Primus guitarist Todd Huth. That was released in 1994. We also have a second Prawn Song Records released from 1994, and that is Laundry's Blacktongue, led by Tim Herb Alexander. So we have these two Primus-adjacent projects to talk about today from 1994. Frankie, what's your familiarity with Porch and Laundry in general? Now, I own these two records that we're discussing. How far out do your tentacles go with these?
I checked Laundry out maybe around 2016 or 2015 when I was doing a deep dive into all the adjacent stuff related to Primus. I recall enjoying it quite a bit, and I'm not too familiar with Porch.
I'm a legitimate Laundry fan and a legitimate Porch fan. I was lucky enough to see Porch play in my town a week after I got married way back in 2014, and it was a school night. It was a great time. I was very tired the next day, but they rocked it. Got to talk to Todd and Chris and Michael, and had a great time with them. Never got a chance to see Laundry, but their touring history, I think, is minuscule. So we'll get into that as we go. You can interact with the pod, guys. You can join the Punch Bowl over at Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star review there. If you're not an Apple products user, I'm not. Frankie, are you an Apple guy?
I have a lot of Apple products, yes. I admit to that.
So Frankie's in the cult. So if you want to curry favor with Frankie, go leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you're a heathen like me, you could leave a 5-star review at our Instagram. Just DM it to us, or, send a 5-star review to primustrackspod@gmail.com or wherever you find us on the interweb. Porch. Let's start with Porch, Frankie. I think Porch is just a fantastic band name. Porch in 1994, this was Todd Huth's band. Shortly after leaving Primus and starting his family, Todd started gigging around the Bay Area with Porch. He was joined by bassist Christopher Fry and drummer Dave Iyer, who I believe Dave has passed on. Chris is still around, and actually when I saw Porch play in 2014, Chris was still playing with them, which was pretty great. This record was produced by Ron Rigler. That should be a familiar name to us primates here.
Yeah.
Ron has joined us on the pod before. You can find his commentary on the Miscellaneous Debris episode as he engineered that release. This record was released in 1994 via Prawn Song with Mammoth distribution, as most Prawn Song records were. And it's got a lot of formats, Frankie. This was released on CD and cassette, of which I have one of each of those. But it was also released on a standard 12-inch vinyl in the UK and a limited edition set of 4 7-inch records in the United States. I'm trying to get my hands on both of those, but it's tough. Price, availability, you name it. Frankie, as an avid collector, you know these hurdles.
Yeah.
They also actually did a 7-inch promo on Alternative Tentacles record. They took one track from this record and put it on a 7-inch. You can actually still purchase that directly from Alternative Tentacles. That is the track Expectorant. And as Todd said, as he told us when we talked to him a while back, Frankie, he seemed to be startled when people described this record as angry. Because, I don't know, when we talked to him, Todd seemed like a really laid-back, reasonable guy, but he's making this music that a lot of people find to be aggressive or confrontational. With what little you've heard, Frankie, what's your interpretation?
There's definitely a really interesting contrast between the music he plays on stage and on his records and the way he's like in person. I was fortunate to meet Todd at New Year's Eve 2019, and he was incredibly kind.
He's a bit Spartan with his words, but and I think that's just part of his personality. But he's quite a nice guy, very accommodating, and
yes,
he'll talk to you. He talked to us at least.
Maybe his uniqueness or very peculiar style can be confused for aggression.
I think there's something there to that, because
maybe that's because there's just not a lot of things to compare it to.
Right, the way that he plays is so unique that, and just of course, the absolute amount of distortion that he can put on his guitar, and as well, just the picking style, that hybrid picking style, that Merle Travis approach that he mentioned to Soya, which was relayed to us during the Sausage Record conversations. Some of that appears on the Porch record too, and so it sounds very in your face, but these are just the sounds that come out of his head and his fingers. Let's sample some tracks from the first Porch record, which is self-titled. It's simply called Porch. If you're looking for it, it's very easy to find on YouTube. If you just search for Porch, it's not going to happen, but if you search for Porch self-titled, or if you search for the first track, which has quite a catchy name, it's Damn I'm Lazy, you'll find the Porch record. Also, Damn I'm Lazy, one of the greatest song titles of all time. Let's take a little sample of the second track on the record, Little White Cracker.
Had a very Motorhead vibe going on.
Oh, yeah, that's a good pull. The Chris's bass there sounds great. It does kind of have a Motorhead vibe to it. And then when Dave and Todd come in, they're just full steam ahead. It is very Motorhead. But what's not very Motorhead is the odd time signature and the odd rhythms that they're putting out there. That's very Todd. It really starts making it their own. But I think you're right. It does have that full speed ahead Motorhead feel to it. But that's
does Porch remind you of Helmet at all?
You know, from time to time it does, because Helmet hits you right in the face, doesn't it? When you listen to them, they are so percussive and just so confrontational. It's weird. I've never heard of a band such like Helmet that felt like they were trying to fight me while I was listening to their music, if that makes any sense. And
yeah, totally.
I hope that's not what they're going for. I think they're just trying to rock out, have a good time, and help people out with their music. And I think there are some tinges of that throughout this record. I just get a rockin' vibe from that one. I don't get the anger portion of things.
You still need to check out White House at some point. White House is a power electronics band that was completely insane.
Oh, you've mentioned them before, I think. Yes. And I think I remember reacting to that description with something like, I think I'm going to avoid it. So yes, this one's really upbeat. It's jangly, it's off kilter, but it starts this record off pretty powerfully. And then things slow down a little bit for the next track called My Ragin' Ragged Booty. I mean, they're free. I'm telling you, Frankie, they're 3 for 3 on track titles to start the record. Damn I'm Lazy, Little White Cracker, My Ragin' Ragged Booty. They just invite the listener in to hear what in the world they're coming up with. that's where we start getting more towards the helmet vibe. Very percussive, and that wall of sound.
Very sluggish.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes, it's almost sludgy, but that odd meter, once again, I love that, with what Todd brings to the table with his riffing there. Dave's up to the task there on drums. He's doing some really interesting stuff. Primates, I think you're starting to hear the pattern. I hope so, because they do establish a nice pattern right off the top. But then, Frankie, they go and break it on track 5 with a track called Your Hair. Very dirgy.
It's a really cool song. It actually has like this grunge vibe going on, right?
Right, yeah, it fits right into that grunge scene. And this was 1994 when grunge had essentially taken over the world by that point. And with bands such as Soundgarden, Nirvana, and you name it, Pearl Jam for sure, Stone Temple Pilots, and on and on and on. But yeah, this song, particularly this track, I think kind of fits that mold the best out of all the tracks on this record. I recall somebody on Reddit at some point saying, how did this track not get more play on college radio? Because it just does have that Gen Z slacker feel to it, I suppose, if that makes sense. I even wrote in my notebook, the famous notebook, Frankie, that it's somewhat mesmerizing in that stoned way. And I wrote, how is this not in some indie film about 90s Gen X kids having a stoned dance party? Does this feel like to you, Frankie, that it would be placed over that scene in the film where, you know, they're having their dance party under the dim lighting, but they're all just kind of swaying because they're all just whacked out on goofballs?
Yes.
Yeah. I know you've been to a bunch of those parties, so you can relate. So they slow it down with Your Hair, and it has this really great vibe to it. And you'll notice that was the first track where we got some vocals from Todd. Those other tracks aren't instrumentals. It's just that Todd's vocals are kind of here and there and somewhat spare depending on the tracks you're on. And it was really funny to hear Soya tell us that Todd was really mousy on the microphone when he was in Primus, but then he's got to be doing vocals over this loud, wonderful music, but his voice is almost not timid, somewhat reticent, it sounds like. He's definitely not screaming. So I get the idea that the music's aggressive from a musical standpoint, but vocally, I'm not hearing it yet. So let's try another track called Bum Holy. This is track 7, and this one has a really cool groove. And just listen to the tune itself, Frankie. We're talking, this was 1994. And remember, the Sausage record came out in 94. This is a far cry from Sausage. That's where he has to start turning it on as far as the vocals go, once they let it go. But I love that groove. It is very catchy.
A total contrast to the previous track.
Yeah. Yeah, they turn it back up with Bum Holy. I said it already, but some of these track names are just fantastic. Bum Holy, Bulbous Head, Tattooed Love Boys, which I believe is a cover. And then the last track is called, we had Your Hair, and then the last track is called Palm Hair, which I think is a reference to self-pleasure. I was told, as a young person, that if I were to touch myself in an intimate way, that hair would grow on the palms of my hands, and that's an old legend that's been passed down. I think it's a wonderful Judeo-Christian tradition to tell your kids that if they touch themselves, that's what will happen. I don't know if that's what that's in reference to, but it certainly brought me back to my Catholic youth. I want to pay homage to the track Iceberg, track number 9. It has one of the better intros as far as this album goes, and to me, I just wrote down Todd as a one-man wrecking crew on this one. So in about 40 seconds, there are about 6 awesome licks there.
Very cool track.
Very cool track. Really powerful intro. That little flare is pretty great that he throws in there at the beginning. I think it comes back around after a time. But that's 100% pure Todd Huth speaking his language through guitar. So we have 10 really strong tracks, and then track 11, I mentioned earlier, is called Palm Hair, and this is about a 7.5-minute jam. It sounds very free-form. In some parts, Frankie, it's jazzy. In some parts, it's rockin'. But it definitely is the loosest track on the album, and we really get an improvisational flair from all 3 participants here. So I'll just play a little bit of Palm Hair. The syncopation there is funny. Pretty clear that this is some kind of jam that they just hit record on and messed around for 7.5 minutes or more. But that's a great way to end the album because it starts with Damn I'm Lazy, which is about 38 seconds, and it ends with this loose jam of Palm Hair. But in between, we get these nicely structured tracks that, at some points it's a wall of noise. At some points, Todd is playing some killer licks. At some points, they bring it down, like with Your Hair. And so it runs the gamut. It's definitely not as in your face as something like a Helmet record. It's a bit more dynamic, but it really does, I think, fit into the mid-90s collective of grunge music, I suppose, or alternative music. And, not necessarily maybe what Todd was going for, but I can see it fitting in very well, and I'm kind of surprised this record didn't move more numbers. What do you think, Frankie? You going to go out and find this one?
I'm definitely enjoying it.
Nice. Of course, this is available on YouTube. Frankie, if you can find the 4x7-inch USA vinyl release for a good price, please let me know. I would love to have that on my shelf. All right, that is Porch, self-titled record, 1994. Now, Porch would go on to release 2 more records in the 2000s, and we will talk about those records when the time comes. It'll be quite a bit of ways down the road, Primates, but I'm looking forward to those other 2 records. I enjoy them just as much as this one. Let's turn our attention, Frankie, to laundry. Did you bring your detergent?
Sure.
Did you bring your fabric softener?
One thing I want to point out about this record is, first of all, the album sleeve.
The laundry record, Blacktongue, 1994. What? I'm holding it right here. Yeah. What do you got?
I think they were definitely impressed by computer graphics at the time. But there's a similar Iron Maiden album that looks extremely dated nowadays. It was generated with computer graphics. I think they got carried away And they didn't think that technology would advance so quickly.
Are you talking about Dance of Death? That
record?
That
one. Yes.
That record came out in what year?
2003. That's unbelievable.
It's already been 20 years since that record? Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable.
Wow. How far we have come with our computer graphics.
Yeah.
Because that record's 20 years old, but that cover looks like it's 30 to 40 years old.
From 95, yeah.
Right. And that brings us to Laundry's Blacktongue, which has its own 90s clunky 3D graphics on the cover, but this is what you expect from 1994.
Very Nintendo 64.
Yeah, or very PS1, when you're running around with Lara Croft or whatever. It's that kind of vector goofiness.
Exactly.
And that's okay. It was 1994, but it was a great effort. You got the 3D on the text of Laundry. You have your 3D figurine. This menacing jester-looking guy on the cover. But what's really cool, Frankie, is that's on the cover, and then when you turn your CD booklet around, you get the backside of him and the backside of the text. Got to give it to him for that. So you get the full view of the jester. Back of his head, pretty shiny. I don't know what he uses, but I want to find out. Laundry, 1994. This record, Blacktongue, was also released on Prawn Song Records, distributed by Mammoth. The lineup is Tim Alexander on drums, Ian Varelia on the Chapman stick, Tom Butler on guitar, Toby Hawkins on vocals. Now, we all know who Tim Alexander is. Frankie, I tried to find Ian, Tom, and Toby. Couldn't find out much about them as far as what they're doing in the present day. Tom Butler is a pretty generic name, in the United States at least. There are a lot of Tom Butlers. Ian Varelia, I found somebody who, with that name, who works at UC Berkeley, so maybe he went into academics, maybe with music. Toby Hawkins was actually, I believe, the vocalist for Counting Crows before Adam, whatever his last name is, joined that band, and they got humongous in 1993 with August and everything after. So Toby Hawkins, he has quite a unique vocal delivery, and of course we're going to be sampling that. I want to go back to Ian Varelia, Frankie. He is credited on this record as playing the Chapman stick. What other name comes to mind when you hear Chapman stick?
Tony Levin.
The one and only correct answer is Tony Levin. I hear Chapman stick, I think Tony Levin. And so this record had a lot of comparisons in its reviews and people trying to make sense of it to King Crimson and Tony Levin. And it may have been by virtue of the Chapman stick solely, but at the same time, much of the musicality really does bring to mind King Crimson throughout many of these tracks. In an interview with somebody who guested on this record, this guy named Don Bajima, he was a poet in the San Francisco Bay Area. Tim Alexander invited him to do a spoken word performance on a track that appears on this record. And then Don sent some snippets of the track, and I think the rest of the record, to a friend of his who was in the music business as a reviewer. The music reviewer said, "Here's what you're going to hear in this music. King Crimson and other projects by Fripp, Eno, Ballou, Bruford, and Levin. Ultravox at times. Rush. Yes. Genesis and Camel. A little Metallica. A little Gary Newman and the Tubeway Army. A little Weather Report. And a lot of Mahavishnu Orchestra." That is quite a combination.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so this reviewer was really high on the musicianship of the four members of this band, as well as the songs that they were putting together. I certainly hear a lot of these influences, but Tim Alexander said it was all coincidence. They didn't go into the studio adding a dash of Rush, with 3 cups of King Crimson and 2 tablespoons of Genesis and so on. It was, let's just play and see what happens. And these guys brought these sounds that were reminiscent of a lot of different bands without being derivative, I think, or redundant. You're more familiar with this one, Frankie, right?
Yes, I think it sounds really cool. It's a really cool album.
It certainly has its own atmosphere. If I was going to describe this album in one word, I would use the word dour. It's the same word I would use to describe the TV series Millennium, which I know you're familiar with, Frankie. It's just so...
I adore Millennium.
It is so dark. It is so gloomy. And it's so persistently so. I'm talking about Millennium. But I can't help but apply that same word to this Laundry record because the vocal deliveries and the lyrics, even the way that they're printed inside the CD booklet, Frankie, they look and sound like the rantings of a madman. This looks like an institutionalized person who needs a lot of help, scrawled these things.
The vocal delivery at times reminds me a bit of Mike Patton. I don't know if the same thing happens to you.
I did not make that association, but I'm curious if there's a specific track where that is true for you.
Right off the gate with Windshield.
So, yes.
It's like a very 90s way of singing.
It is. He kind of has that, and it knowing that he was in Counting Crows for a spell, his vocal delivery fits very well with Counting Crows, because that's what the guy that followed him did, too. With that, not necessarily whiny approach, but he certainly takes liberties with his voice. He's not necessarily hitting notes. He's more hitting emotional notes than musical notes. And I think that is quite apparent readily throughout this record. It's intense, it's brooding, it's disorienting, it's dark, and this is, by the way, Frankie, the dictionary definition of dour, relentlessly severe. That's pretty good. Relentlessly severe. Yes, that's what this record is to me. And it's really easy to see some of those reference points that I mentioned earlier. So let's sample some of the first 4 tracks. First track on the record is called Windshield. King Crimson.
Or Peter Gabriel.
Peter Gabriel. There's Tim. Yeah, there's Mike.
Really complex drum work by Tim.
Very much so. This track
very technical.
This track starts the album out in a great way. Tim is his technicality is showing off, and he's not showing off, but his technicality is showing all throughout this record. And he is playing a complicated drum pattern there. He is just really letting loose throughout the record, and he gets us off to a great start. I do hear the pattern there in a couple of those vocal deliveries. I think I hear what you're hearing, at least, Frankie, there. So Toby Hawkins, I think, is an acquired taste. I would say his voice really split reviewers. I want to say 50-50, but a lot of reviewers said that his voice detracted from the record, unfortunately. I don't really have a problem with his vocals on this record.
I think it fits very well.
With his delivery, once again, it sounds like this is institutional, the vocal delivery paired with the lyrics. It's just wallowing in this self-loathing and self-pity and inability to live a life. But it really does also take us to the crossroads of straight-ahead rock and prog music. I mean, this album is cataloged and reviewed on a lot of prog websites, and I think deservedly so, because there are some prog elements. And I don't know this, Frankie, and maybe Primates, you can help. Is there such a thing as dark prog? Is that a subgenre?
I've never heard of something like that.
Maybe this is the first dark prog record ever recorded. It has that vibe. And it's got a lot of, there's a lot of reasons I say that. One would be the vocals. 2 would be the real harsh nature of that Chapman stick. Usually it sounds a little more rounded, especially when you hear Tony Levin playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But this one has more of a sharp edge to it. And then Tim's drums have a lot of reverb on them. It's very spacious, his drum sound on this record. And not as gargantuan as one would think, given that it's his band, and you would think he's just going to put the drums out over everything and just take control. But the mixing is all done very tastefully. Speaking of mixing and that sort of technical business, that in our notes it says all songs are written by Laundry, except the track 19, with music by Laundry and lyrics by Don Bajima, the poet mentioned earlier. This is the verbiage from the sleeve, Frankie. It says, recorded, stressed, mixed, impatiently produced at the log cabin. Log Cabin, of course, Tim Alexander's house. That is where he recorded Wounded Knee, for example. So Log Cabin shows up there. Also, the track 19, they actually ended up recording an ultrasound, and we all know it was recorded there. The answer is Pork Soda. So, they went back to Pork Soda to get that big sound for the track 19, which we'll hear in a little bit. The second track on the record is called Blizzard Face. Another great track title. I want to play about 30 seconds of this one because they really let it rip near the end of the track. The rhythm section on this record is phenomenal, and it really shows, particularly on a track such as this. Yeah!
I think I like the previous track a lot more. It was a bit more melodic.
All right, you're looking for melody. I can help you out. We're going to hear about 30 seconds from the title track, Blacktongue, which is track 3 if you're following along in your CD booklet. Frankie wants melody, Frankie gets melody. How's that for you?
That was pretty nice.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's kind of cool with this record because I'm calling it dour, but with those moments like that, things lighten up a little bit because we get those proggy elements or those melodic elements. They still are very haunting, given the key and tonality that these guys are choosing. But things lighten up a little bit, and it's not so sludgy and brooding as some of these other tracks. And it's not as straight ahead as something like the end of Blizzard Face, where they just straight up rock it. So there's a lot of dynamic elements going on here. This record was pretty well received by a lot of reviewers. As I said, Frankie, they were somewhat split on the vocals. From one particular prog website, a reviewer said, Blacktongue would definitely not be the choice for the passive listener, but it passes the prog litmus test more resolutely. This reviewer also said, not a masterpiece, but a highly enjoyable recommended listen. Just one review, but that seemed to be the case with a lot of reviewers who found this really rewarding, despite the just being beat over the head with the ravings of a madman as far as the lyrics go. And honestly, Frankie, with this record, I don't really listen to the lyrics that closely. How about you?
No. I think it's easier to get lost in the music. It's such a dense, such a wall of sound. There's so much going on with the drums, with the bass. So, yeah, I think the lyrics are the least of our concerns on this record. Yeah,
they are almost secondary, which, of course, as Primus fans, we're, you and I, huge on the lyrics because of the lyricist behind because of the lyricist behind them and his ability to tell a story. These lyrics, they kind of just tread the same ground over and over again as far as I'm concerned. And also, because they're scrawled in such a way, in the liner notes, they're also very hard to decode. I can't read half of them, and I kind of run out of patience. So, note to all of you out there, please print your lyrics legibly. You'll engage your listener more. Let's hear a snippet from the track Monarch Man, which a lot of reviewers pointed to as a highlight from the record. can't believe I'm about to say this, Frankie, but I could actually dance to a laundry track. It's danceable. It's got a nice groove to it. There's a bit more melody for you, too. So these rewarding parts are often in the middle of the track. The tracks tend to start out more heavy and then reward you with some of these proggier elements in the middle and near the end. But a lot of these, but once again, they're highly structured. You get 14 tracks and you get 62 minutes of music that's highly structured. There really isn't much as far as loose ends. Tim really had things buttoned up nicely with his arrangements here.
Did you say ultrasound or log cabin?
The record was recorded, mixed, and produced at Log Cabin. The track 19 was the only track not recorded at Log Cabin. That was at Ultrasound. If
I'm not mistaken, well, we know that some Pork Soda work was done at Log Cabin, but if I'm not mistaken, is it the picture that can be found in the cassette tape of Pork Soda where they're sitting in the middle of the woods? And it's also present in the gatefold, but as a much smaller picture.
Yeah, I know the image you're talking about. I am not certain if that's at Log Cabin, because Log Cabin is Herb's house, and I don't know if he lived in the woods. But
he lived in the middle of the woods.
With a name like Log Cabin, I suppose he's either living in the woods or at a syrup factory. And I remember I was doing some research trying to find Log Cabin Studio, and I actually found a house in the Bay Area that was an actual log cabin that had a home studio in it. I don't think that was Herb's, though. So that's a mystery. When we get him on, Frankie, how about we ask him about all his previous addresses? That won't be suspicious at all.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Herb is just plowing through a lot of this record. And that's not a pejorative thing to say. He is just so on time and, with those precision fills and just driving these tracks. Even those slower tempo tracks, he's driving it. I want to point out a couple other tracks that are standouts for me. One is called Blood Clot, and I really enjoy this track because of the dissonance of what the Chapman stick and guitar are doing, but also because it's faster paced and it drives, and Herb does some really cool stuff. It's rad.
In the beginning, the instrumentation was totally King Crimson.
Very much so, and here it comes back again, yeah. For certain. And then those verses go to a different place, and so it is very reminiscent in spots of different acts, but once again, these guys are putting a very original spin on it, so it doesn't sound like they're just trying to be another band. This album is available on YouTube. Decent rips of the audio. I do recommend that you buy the CD secondhand, whether it's Discogs or wherever you can find it, and get yourself a proper rip because it's got really nice audio quality. Frankie, I'm a big fan of this record, actually. This was a fun one to dig back out. I played it quite a bit when I first acquired it around the turn of the century, and I think this was one of the albums I listened to quite a bit and annoyed my roommate with. And Herb's playing, of course, top-notch throughout. Those quick hands we talk about, economy of motion, it's all there.
Ghost notes.
Ghost notes, absolutely. There's one other thing I wanted to mention, and we actually have a live cut, and I can't wait to show that one to you, Frankie. So Don Bajima is credited as the voice on the track called 19. It's track 13 on the record. It's a slow groove. It's almost 10 minutes, but he's just reciting some words he wrote, and it sounds like he's on somebody's answering machine taking up all the tape. It's a pretty cool concept. At the very beginning of the track Monarch Man, you hear what sounds like a cat purring. There it is right there. There's Kitty. That purring is credited to Sorbet. Now, Sorbet is either somebody's cat, or, as is claimed on Discogs, that is a pseudonym for Maynard James Keenan. I didn't know that guy could purr like that. But we do know that there's quite a lot of crossover in the Primus and Tool world, Frankie. And I think we should mention that because the day this episode drops, April 17th, if you're listening to this on April 17th, Primus is playing a benefit show for their friend Jimmy Hayward, and Justin Chancellor and Danny Carey are sitting in with them for most, if not all, of the evening. So lots of Primus Tool crossover, including on this hallowed day. Frankie, I know you have all the connections that you could muster as far as Primus and Tool.
Okay, I do hope I have all the connections, and if we're missing something, please kindly let us know what we missed.
Absolutely.
Any Tool experts out there. So this is my list. Primus, Tool, and Everclear at the Oakland Coliseum in 1995, New Year's Eve.
Oh, 95. Okay.
Yeah. Les teasing Anima during multiple performances.
Yep.
Justin Chancellor as the Goblin Master in the Valley.
Oh, yeah.
Danny Carey filling in for Herb.
Oh, after Herb's heart attack, yes.
Yes.
Danny played 5 or 6 shows. I don't remember the number.
Danny Carey and Tim Alexander drumming together for the 2014 drum Spectacular.
Because of the misprint on the poster, yes. The Spectacular.
Yes. Humber Tajín in Mexico, 2014. That was Pucifer, Primus, and Tool. And while Pucifer was playing, Tim Alexander was actually watching them perform on stage, sitting back on a chair in front of a trailer park. Yeah. Herb was also a member of A Perfect Circle.
I think he is drums on the first track of that first Perfect Circle record, if I recall correctly.
Les and Maynard both make wine. Herb and Maynard trained together in jiu-jitsu.
Yep. Oh, and I should mention, Herb was on a podcast a while back, I think had a self-defense, kind of a firearms theme to it. I don't know why Herb was on this podcast. You know, Herb said, I'll talk to Maynard for you guys to get him on, but tell Maynard I can still whoop him. So a little bit of trash talk from Herb there. I thought that was funny.
Adam Jones designed a poster for Primus for the show at the Peabody Opera House in St. Louis on October 28th, 2012. It's a very Toolesque poster, for sure.
If you've seen it, you know. Absolutely. Yeah.
Primus opening for Tool in early 2016.
Oh, that's right. When they played some huge venues, I believe mostly on the West Coast.
Yes. Yeah. And Primus would play these very short sets with mostly hits, but they did bust out the last full Welcome to This World performance to date.
Well, if you're going to open for Tool, you got to go big.
Yeah. There have been several one-offs where Primus and Tool have converged together on the same festival or the same stage. Yeah. I do recall back in 2017, there was like this kind of really special one-off that had Tool, Primus, Melvins, Clutch.
Okay.
And I don't know who else was on the bill. And Tool and Primus also crossed paths at Lollapalooza in 1993. So there have been several one-offs over the years. And of course, last but not least, the upcoming show.
That's right. Oh, we should also mention Les and Danny cutting some tracks with Adrian Belew for a couple of Adrian's records.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So a lot of crossover over the years. So this is not an uncommon thing. And I couldn't find it, and I tried, but I swear Laundry opened for Tool at some point. I couldn't tell you what year or what dates, but I'm pretty sure that happened.
So you got a live cut.
So that crossover was there for sure. And it'd be thematically on point, I think, for Laundry. And I do, Frankie, I have a live cut. Now, this is an interesting live cut. This is from November of 1996 at the Montreal Drum Festival. This is Tim Alexander, Tom Butler, and Ian Varela performing Windshield, but they don't have a vocalist. So this performance was all instrumental. Let's hear how they sound live. It's a pretty decent recording. Rippin'.
That was really cool.
I actually really like this instrumental version. I would love to hear instrumental versions of all the Blacktongue tracks, not because I don't like the vocals, but because I just want to hear those intricacies. And you can hear what Tim's doing very well on that recording. So that's Laundry and Porch, Frankie. Two locations in or on someone's house that are very important, very convenient, and they also have fantastic music to accompany them. And once again, these CDs are incredibly hard to find. You're going to have to watch those lists on Discogs, but if you could get them, they're well worth your time. Final thoughts, Frankie? You're going to go pursue these albums some more? I think I'm going to dig in.
Final thoughts, Todd Huth is a genius, and Tim Alexander is amazing on every single thing he plays on.
Pretty great to get to hear him really stretch out and do something outside of the confines of Primus. And I don't mean confines in a negative way, because there's just a certain way things are done in Primus, and there's a certain way things are done outside of Primus. And so
yes.
Tim being able to stretch out and try these different things is really great to hear. We get to hear more of the full picture of his musicianship. That's what I really appreciate about Blacktongue. Dabbles in prog, gives us some rock, it has some wild-ass lyrics and vocals, and it's quite a pretty picture when it's all put together. And that Porch record, it's 100% Todd Huth, and I just adore Todd's guitar playing of all kinds. Laundry's Blacktongue and Porch is self-titled. You've been tracked. Next time, Frankie, it's finally time. The angelic fish are here.
I can't wait for this really, really fascinating record.
That's right. We're going to go track by track with Les Claypool and the Holy Mackerel present Highball with the Devil. So
special request. For the first episode, we got a sample Adam Gates saying, "Good evening, children."
We should be sampling Adam Gates every episode. Yeah. What the hell is wrong with us? That's all there is to it, Primates. At Primus Tracks on Instagram and Twitter. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. Patreon.com/Primus Tracks for video of episodes such as this one and other special features. Later days.
Willie Mays.